My wife cheated on me with our neighbor, then forged my signature to steal $250, $0 of our inheritance, and now she's claiming I abandoned her and the kids in the divorce. I never thought I'd see our marriage turn into a courtroom over millions in property. Hello, everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Lisa, turned out to be a cheating, manipulative bitch who not only slept around with our neighbor, but also managed to forge my signature to steal $500,000 from our inheritance. It all started with the usual signs: late nights, secretive texts, and her suddenly being too busy for anything that didn't involve her phone or some excuse about work stress. But I never really wanted to believe she'd do something like this. I mean, we had a good life, right? Or at least I thought so. We met when I was in college, and Lisa was the girl who seemed perfect, beautiful, smart, charming. We got married 5 years ago, and for a while everything felt stable. She was always a little bitchy when things didn't go her way, but I figured that was just her personality. She loved the luxury life, loved her shopping sprees, and had this way of making me feel guilty if I didn't indulge her every whim. I worked hard, made decent money, and thought I was providing well for her and our two kids, Emma and Jake. But lately, I'd noticed things that didn't add up. She'd come home smelling like perfume I didn't recognize, or she'd get home late and avoid my eyes. She also started spending more time on her phone, keeping her screen hidden. I'd catch her deleting messages, or she'd quickly lock her phone when I entered the room. I shrugged it off as just her being paranoid or maybe work-related stress, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. The last straw was when I found a hotel key card in her purse after she'd gone out with her friends. That's when I started digging. One night, I decided to check her phone when she was asleep. I know it's invasive, but I felt like I had to know. I found texts from a guy named Mark, our neighbor, the guy who lives just 2 houses down. Their conversations weren't just friendly, they were downright flirtatious. She called him sweetheart more than once, and there were several photos of her in lingerie saying she missed him. That hit me like a punch in the gut. I couldn't believe she'd been cheating on me with someone who lives right next door. What made it worse was how she lied when I confronted her about the texts. She said I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that Mark was just a friend helping her with some home repairs. She even had the nerve to say I was overreacting and that I was insecure, but I knew better. I had the evidence. I saw the messages, the photos, the dates. It wasn't just a fling, it was an affair, and she was lying her ass off to cover it up. I felt numb. My mind was racing with questions. How long has this been going on? How many nights did she spend with him? Was I just a paycheck to her? I was furious but also devastated. I loved her once, and now I was staring at this stranger who I thought was my wife. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything I'd seen, feeling betrayed, stupid, and angry at myself for not noticing sooner. And that was just the beginning. After I found out about Lisa's affair, everything changed. The house felt colder, quieter. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, but I knew I had to confront her again, this time with proof. I waited until she returned home from her work trip, which I later learned she'd never actually gone on. She walked in, acting normal, like she hadn't just been caught red-handed. That's what made me so mad. It was all so brazen, so blatant. I told her I knew about Mark. Her face twisted into this bitchy sneer, like she thought she could just spin her way out of it. "You're crazy," she snapped. "You're paranoid, and I don't know what you're talking about." She tried to brush it off, but I laid out the messages, the photos, everything I'd found. Her face went pale for a second, then she got defensive, throwing out all these lies about how she was just helping Mark with his yard work, how they'd been just friends. She even claimed I was imagining things, that I was insecure and jealous. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I told her I wanted a divorce. Not because I was just angry, but because I saw who she really was. Someone selfish, manipulative, and willing to cheat with our neighbor just to get her way. That's when she threw a tantrum, screaming that I was ruining her life, that I was abandoning her and the kids. She kept crying, acting like a victim, trying to guilt me into staying. But I'd had enough. I told her she'd crossed the line and I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. The next day, I hired a private investigator. I needed to know exactly what she was up to behind my back. Turns out I was right. She'd been sneaking out at night, meeting Mark at some hotel nearby. They'd been sleeping together for months, probably since the beginning of the year. They even planned to run away together, according to the investigator's report. I was stunned. I'd always thought Lisa was a bit high maintenance, but I never imagined she'd be capable of this level of betrayal. Meanwhile, she was lying through her teeth, claiming I was just paranoid, that I was imagining the affair, that I was trying to ruin her reputation. She'd even gone as far as forging my signature on some documents, trying to transfer money from our inheritance account 250, gone just like that. She said I abandoned her and the kids, but I knew the truth. She was the one who'd abandoned her integrity, her vows, and her sense of decency. I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and helplessness. I'd always thought marriage was supposed to be about trust, about standing by each other. But Lisa had proven me wrong. I started to realize I wasn't just dealing with infidelity. I was dealing with someone who was willing to destroy everything we built for her own benefit. The betrayal cut deep, more than I expected. And that's when I decided I had to fight back, not just for the money but for my dignity. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, especially not after what she'd done. I had to come up with a plan, something that would make her regret ever crossing me. That's when I started thinking about revenge, about turning her lies and manipulations back on her. But I knew this wasn't going to be easy. She was a cunning woman and I had to be smarter. I spent the next few days gathering everything, proof of her affair, the forged signatures, the evidence of her plans to run away. I also contacted a lawyer, someone who specialized in divorce and asset recovery. I wanted to make sure I'd get what was rightfully mine and protect my kids from her manipulative ways. Lisa kept insisting I was overreacting, that she loved me, that everything would be fine if I just forgave her. But I knew better. I had seen her true face, and I wasn't about to let her get away with this. Now I sit here, writing all this down because I feel like I need to get it out. This whole nightmare, how my wife turned into a con artist and a homewrecker, how she's now claiming I've abandoned her and our children when all I wanted was honesty and loyalty. I never thought I'd be the guy who'd have to fight for his marriage, his money, and his dignity this way. But here I am, ready to do whatever it takes to make her pay for what she's done. Once I had all the evidence laid out, the texts, the hotel receipts, the forged signatures, I knew I couldn't just confront Lisa again without a solid plan. She was slick, manipulative, and had a way of twisting everything around to make herself look innocent. That's why I decided to go straight to my lawyer first and get everything documented. If she thought she could keep lying and stealing, I'd make sure she paid for it legally. The lawyer, a guy named Mark, ironic, right, was sharp. He told me that forging my signature on the inheritance documents was a serious crime, and that I had grounds to press charges if I wanted. But what I wanted more was to get my money back and protect my kids from her manipulations. I told him about her plans to run away with Mark and how she'd been lying about everything. We discussed the best way to handle the divorce, especially since she was claiming I'd abandoned her and the kids. Meanwhile, Lisa kept playing the victim. She'd cry, scream, and accuse me of trying to ruin her life. She told friends and family I was just jealous, that I didn't trust her, and that she was the one suffering. But I knew the truth. She was the one who betrayed us all. The more she lied, the angrier I got. I started to see her for what she truly was, a selfish, dishonest woman who'd do anything to get her way, even if it meant destroying our marriage and stealing from her own family. I decided to take legal action to freeze her accounts and prevent her from moving any more money. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her, just in case she tried to disappear with the kids or hide her assets. The investigator confirmed she was planning to leave town with Mark after the divorce papers were filed, and I realized I had to act fast. I didn't want her to run away with everything we'd built. especially not after she'd betrayed me so thoroughly. One of the most shocking moments was when I found out she'd already transferred a good chunk of the inheritance, around $250, into an offshore account. She forged my signature on the transfer documents, making it look like I approved. I couldn't believe she'd go this far. That money was supposed to be for our kids' future, and she was just throwing it away with her lies and manipulations. I was furious. All I wanted was my share of the inheritance, and now I had to fight for it in court. I also learned that she'd been having an affair with Mark for months, probably since before I even suspected. The investigator caught her meeting him at hotels, sneaking out late at night. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. How could she do this to me, to our family? It was like everything I believed in was a lie. I started questioning everything, our vows, her love, her honesty. It was a gut punch every time I thought about it. Despite all this, I tried to keep my composure. I knew I had to be smart about how I handled her. I didn't want to give her any reason to accuse me of abuse or abandonment. I kept records of everything, texts, bank statements, witness testimonies, and prepared for the court hearing. I wanted my rights protected, and I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. But inside, I was hurting. Betrayal cuts deep, and I wasn't sure how I was going to recover from this. The worst part was watching her try to spin her lies. She told everyone I was a bad husband, that I'd abandoned her and the kids, that she was suffering. But I knew the truth. I was the one who'd been betrayed, who'd been robbed of our future. I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and helplessness. I'd loved her once, believed in us, and now I was fighting just to salvage what was left, my dignity, my money, and my sanity. I knew this wasn't over. The court battles, the financial mess, the emotional wreckage, they were just beginning. I had to stay strong for myself and for my kids. But honestly, I don't know how much more I can take. The woman I married turned into someone I barely recognize, greedy, deceitful, and willing to tear our lives apart just to get what she wanted. And now, I'm left to pick up the pieces and figure out how to move forward from all of this. Chaos? The court date finally arrived after weeks of back-and-forth legal battles, and I was prepared, more than I ever thought I'd have to be. Seeing her in that courtroom, Lisa looked confident, even smug. She kept insisting I was the one who'd abandoned her and the kids, that I was jealous and paranoid. She spun her web of lies so convincingly I almost started to doubt myself. But I had the evidence, texts, bank statements, the forged signatures, and I knew I had to stay firm. My lawyer laid out everything clearly: the affair, the theft of inheritance, the forged documents, her plans to abscond with the kids. We argued that she was not only untrustworthy but also dangerous because she demonstrated a willingness to manipulate and steal from her own family. The judge listened carefully, asking questions about the evidence and the timeline of her actions. I could see her trying to maintain her composure, but her eyes kept darting around, trying to find a way out. The most tense moment came when my lawyer presented the forged signatures. Lisa's face went pale, and she tried to deny everything, claiming she had no idea how her signature ended up on those documents. But the handwriting expert confirmed it was her. That was the nail in the coffin. The judge looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and anger. It was clear she'd been caught red-handed, and her lies were unraveling fast. Meanwhile, I requested full custody of the kids, knowing that her manipulative nature and her willingness to lie and steal made her unfit to care for Emma and Jake. She yelled and protested, claiming I was trying to take her children away, but I knew I was doing what was best for them. They deserved stability, honesty, and love, not a mother who was willing to betray everything for her own greed. The judge awarded me temporary custody, and she was ordered to pay restitution for the stolen inheritance. The court also froze her accounts and began proceedings to recover the money she'd transferred offshore. I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The nightmare wasn't over yet, but at least I'd gotten some justice. I had won the battle, but the war was still ongoing. After the hearing, Lisa stormed out of the courtroom, screaming that I was ruining her life, that she'd never forgive me for destroying her reputation. She looked like a wild woman, tears streaming down her face, but I saw through her act. She was upset because she'd been caught, plain and simple. I didn't bother to chase her. I knew she'd only spin more lies. Instead, I went to see my lawyer and start planning the next steps: how to recover the rest of the money, how to protect my kids, and how to rebuild my life. That night, I sat alone in my house, feeling drained but oddly relieved. I'd faced everything head-on. I'd uncovered her lies, fought in court, and taken back what was rightfully mine. But inside, I was hurting. I kept asking myself how someone I loved could turn into such a monster. I thought I knew her, but I was wrong. She was a master manipulator, a liar, a thief. And now I was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered marriage and a broken trust. I realized I'd been naive, thinking that love meant blind trust. It does. Love means honesty, loyalty, and respect. Without those, you're just living in a house built on lies. I don't know what the future holds, but I do. No, I won't let her take everything from me again. I'll protect my kids, my sanity, and whatever's left of my dignity. And I'll keep reminding myself that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even if it means losing everything else in the process. The aftermath of the court victory hit me harder than I expected. I thought I'd feel relief, like finally I could start piecing my life back together. But instead, I was overwhelmed with a mix of exhaustion, anger, and a strange sense of emptiness. Lisa was ordered to pay back the stolen inheritance, and the court took steps to freeze her assets, but I knew this was only the beginning. The damage was done, and the emotional scars ran deep. In the days that followed, I focused on the kids. Emma and Jake didn't fully understand what was happening, but they sensed the tension. Emma kept asking where Mommy was, and I had to hold back tears every time I explained that Mommy was busy and needed some space. I promised I'd do everything I could to protect them and make sure they felt safe. It was heartbreaking knowing their mother was capable of lying and stealing from us, but I had to stay strong for their sake. I also started to realize how much Lisa had manipulated everyone around her. She told her friends she was the victim, that I was the one who'd abandoned her and the kids, that I'd been unfaithful and neglectful. But I had proof of her affair and her theft. I knew she'd been lying to everyone, spinning her web of deceit to save her own skin. That made me angrier. The fact that she was willing to destroy her reputation and ours just to cover her tracks. I honestly wondered how long she'd been planning this, how many other lies she'd told before I even caught her. Meanwhile, I was trying to rebuild my finances. I hired a financial advisor to help me track down the stolen money, and I filed a formal police report about the forged signatures and offshore transfer. It was a long, tedious process, but I was determined to get every dollar back. I also started to think about my future, what I wanted, what I deserved. I realized I'd been so caught up in the marriage that I'd let myself fall into a routine, neglecting my own needs that had to change. The hardest part was dealing with the betrayal on a personal level. I'd always thought Lisa was my partner, but she turned out to be someone else entirely, selfish, manipulative, and willing to destroy everything for her own benefit. It made me question everything about trust and love. How could I have been so blind? How could I have believed in her so blindly? One night I sat on the porch, staring at the stars, trying to process everything. I realized I'd been living in denial, hoping she'd change, that maybe it was just a phase, but now I knew better. Some people don't change. Some betray you so deeply that there's no coming back. And I had to accept that. I had to let go of the hope that she'd somehow come around or that I could fix this. I also thought about revenge, not just legal but personal. I wanted her to feel what I felt, betrayed, humiliated, and broke. Not in a malicious way, but in a way that made her realize her actions had consequences. That's when I decided to cut her out of my life completely. No more phone calls, no more lies, no more pretending everything was okay. I owed it to myself and my kids to move forward. But more than anything, I wanted to teach my kids that honesty and integrity mattered. I didn't want them growing up thinking betrayal was acceptable or that lying could get you anything you wanted. I promised myself I'd be better, stronger, and more cautious. I'd rebuild my life on honesty and respect, something Lisa had clearly lost along the way. As I write this, I realize that what I've been through has changed me forever. I'm no longer the naive guy who thought marriage was just about love. It's about trust, loyalty, and standing by each other. Lisa broke that trust, and I've had to learn how to pick up the pieces and move on. I still feel the sting of betrayal, but I also feel a growing sense of resolve. I will protect my kids, fight for what's rightfully mine, and never let anyone manipulate me again. That's the lesson I've learned. Sometimes you have to fight dirty to win back your life, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. Looking back now, I realize how much I underestimated her. Lisa was always the charming, bitchy woman who knew exactly how to twist every situation to her advantage. I thought I knew her, thought I loved her, but she was just playing a long game. All those late nights, the secret calls, the lies about work, turns out she was planning her escape, her betrayal, and her theft from the very beginning. I was just too blind to see it. Getting through the court process was brutal. Watching her try to deny everything, hearing her spin her web of lies, and then seeing her caught in her own deception. There was a sick satisfaction in that. But it also left me hollow. The trust was gone. The woman I married had turned into someone I barely recognized, someone capable of stealing $500,000 from our future, just so she could run off with her lover and live her own version of happiness. That realization hit hard. The aftermath was a mix of cleanup and rebuilding. I managed to recover most of the stolen money through legal channels, but I knew some of it was gone for good, siphoned into offshore accounts and hidden away. Still, I refused to give up. I worked tirelessly to secure my financial future, to protect my kids, and to rebuild the broken pieces of my life. I cut all ties with Lisa. No contact, no excuses. She had burned every bridge, and honestly, I didn't want her back. I wanted peace, and I wanted to be the kind of man who could trust again someday. The kids, Emma and Jake, are my reason for pushing forward. They're resilient, and I make sure they feel loved and safe every single day. I tell them the truth as much as they can understand, about trust, honesty, and how sometimes people make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they're bad people. I want to teach them that integrity matters, that they deserve better than betrayal and lies. As for Lisa, she's still trying to spin her story, claiming I abandoned her and the kids, accusing me of all sorts of things I know aren't true. But I don't care anymore. Her lies don't hold weight. I've moved on, and I've learned that the only way to survive betrayal is to stand tall, face the truth, and never let anyone manipulate you again. Looking at everything now, I realize I've grown stronger, more cautious, yes, but also more aware of what's real and what's not. Love isn't just about passion or companionship, it's about trust, respect, and loyalty. Without those, everything crumbles. I've seen that firsthand. This experience has changed me forever. I no longer trust blindly, and I no longer believe in fairy tale endings. I believe in honesty, in fighting for what's right, and in protecting what matters most, my kids and my own integrity. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I also know I'll never let it define me. I'll keep moving forward, stronger and wiser, knowing that sometimes the biggest lesson is learning to stand up after you've been knocked down. And I've done that. I've fought hard, and I've won, not just in court but in reclaiming my life from the chaos she brought in. That's what matters now.